In this section, we are gonna look to the DHCP operations on multi-layer switches. First, let's take a look to the DHCP overview and remind the protocol. DHCP is Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, which can dynamically assign IP address, subnet mask, and default gateway for the end devices. It's almost mandatory to use for large corporate networks, and the port number is 67. So why it's almost mandatory? Because if you don't use a DHCP server, and if you have like 10,000 end devices, for example, PCs, plus printers, plus IP phones, you need to go to all end devices and you need to define IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and DNS or domain names as well. And that's almost impossible, as you know. And let's take a look how we can configure DHCP on our multi-layer switch. In the config mode, we have an interface VLAN 10 interface, and we assign an IP address 1.1 to that interface. This IP address can be used for the remote connection for this multi-layer switch as well. Then we have an IP address range that we exclude from our DHCP cloud. The range is between 1.2 and 1.5. Then I'm defining a DHCP pool. The name of my pool is users for this example. And I'm defining a IP address range which covers between 1.1 and 1.254, and I'm defining a default gateway for this pool. So 1.1 is the default gateway, and this range is excluded, so this guy will assign the IP addresses between 1.6 until 254. If I want to assign a manual IP to the client via multi-layer switch, what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna configure a DHCP pool again, and its name is myPC for this example. I'm defining the host IP address by using host and IP address and the subnet mask command. And second, I'm defining a client identifier, or I can use an hardware address command, which is easier. Hardware address and the MAC address of the device. So as soon as I do this, I'm assigning the 1.99 IP to the device with the MAC address with XXXX and YYYY and whatever it is. Let's take a look how we can configure the DHCP relay on MLS2. To configure an DHCP relay, we are going under the VLAN mode, interface VLAN mode. We are defining an IP address again, which is 11 as the IP address of the multi-layer switch, and I'm defining an IP helper address. If a client sends a DHCP request to multi-layer switch takes the request and forwards it to a remote server which has an IP address of this. And that's it. And here is the how we can configure the DHCP option value on MLS, and that's pretty simple. And we just type option and option number value.